drop this from current to subsequent law line. So again, that limitation is important to us. If you have ideas for different lengths, different years, different numbers in terms of what that limitation might be, I know many of you don't want that we heard, but if there are counter suggestions in terms of the length of the limitation, we're interested in hearing that too. We understand there's a wide variety at the state level. We're interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay, I had a list of 5. Thank you. So first let me say that section F has been distributed, so it would be helpful if between now and tomorrow you have a chance to take a look at it, because it may answer some questions about what's being referred to as misrepresentations. So that. Now, I do want to say we've got a very large agenda for the next 2 days, where we've still got, we had a break for public comment at 4:30. We've got 16 people signed up to give public comment. So I'm going to stick with the list, but I'm going to ask you to make comments that have not yet been made. So we can move on if there isn't a lot new on these 3 sections. Okay. So with that, David, your hand was up first.
I wanted to address the concept of state protections for federal programs. So I mean, it becomes 50 plus. Including DC and territories in all 50 states. Are those who think this is very important? Are you comfortable with the concept of, let's say, a student is attending Puffery College? Puffery is the word of the day. And
many of us have, I guess.
That's it. That's located in Lower Manhattan, and 2 students attend the same program at the same time, get the same loan, and there's found to be misrepresentation. And one of those students lives in Brooklyn, and the other student lives in Jersey City. But because New York and New Jersey might have very different, I don't know, but let's just say, for argument's sake, they have extremely different consumer protection laws. Those 2 students who are in the exact same situation and have both been wronged the exact same way by the same school are entitled to perhaps very different settlements I mean, that's something that I'm not completely comfortable with. Where do these things end? What if a state said, well, yes, public service loan forgiveness kicks in after 120 monthly payments, but we think that our residents of the great state of fill in blank deserve it after 108 monthly payments. So we're saying that the federal government has to. I'm assuming that the federal government would say, no, you have no authority to do that. So does this only apply to consumer protection type of issues? And does its root lie in the fact that when the federal student loan programs were first designed, they were this federal and state partnership, with the state guarantee agencies, which, the department doesn't use as a model anymore. I'm not arguing against the state protection, but there just seems to me this inequity, this potential for inequity, and perhaps its basis is on a model that's no longer in use.
Thank you. Eileen?
Sure. I guess I can just jump right in and address what you were asking about, David, and I appreciate the comments. Because it's something that we had discussed a lot at the last session, which is that if it's only state law, there can be situations of unfairness, where some people could be exposed to exactly the same conduct but have a different remedy. which is why we strenuously argued for retention of state law and an additional inclusion of a federal standard that would set a baseline of protection for everyone. States don't have the ability to dictate the terms of repayment for federal student loans. But the state law component of it is very important because it's a law that has developed over time to address exactly what we're talking about here, which is what is unfair for a business or a school, and what standards govern their conduct. It's important, and schools know it's important, and they're already complying with it. I mean, we have put forth a lot of reasons why retaining the state consumer protection law is very important. I don't think that the partnership between states and the federal government has ended, and I don't think the department would suggest that it has ended simply because there aren't state guarantee agencies occupying the same role in the program. States are a part of the triad of enforcement in this program, and what I'm seeing in this proposal, and I don't quite understand the reason why for the department, is that you have taken everything that used to apply and in fact will still apply. That's what I want to make clear. State law is still going to be the standard for every loan that is in existence and will be issued prior to the effective date of this law. And so I don't understand exactly the justification for removing it. You've taken the state consumer protection law as it exists. The standard that did exist is that you had to have a cause of action. Now you have to have a judgment. And I guess the rationale for it just doesn't, it's not satisfying. I actually don't understand what it is, because I mean, Noah asked if what you're intending to do is to capture exactly everything that would be captured by state law, but just using different words, like by reference to the department's misrepresentation regulation or breach of contract. That doesn't seem to actually solve any of the problems. I actually don't know what, other than difficulty of administration, what the problem that the department sees with incorporation of state law is. Because looking for the definition of what constitutes contract law is going to be just as burdensome. You're still going to have to look to state law for existing loans anyway. So I guess this rationale, it doesn't actually make sense. And if state law isn't the standard, why does a judgment under state law mean anything? You're not even saying, well, it's a judgment about a breach of contract. It's just a judgment under state law. I understand I have to relate to the Division of Educational Loans and Services, but that doesn't, there's an irrationality there that I don't completely understand.
Okay, thanks. Walter?
So I wanted to make a comment about the 2-year limit, and I wanted to raise a scenario that would apply to active duty and reserve members of state armed services. So say they attended a school for a year, and then they had to withdraw because they were called up or they were deployed. So how would that be taken into consideration for the next 2 years?
I'm going to let a bunch of comments go, and I've asked the department to make notes, and then we'll go to them and have them answer a couple of questions at once. Maggie.
I wanted to follow up on the standards and sort of expanding the standards from just breach of contract and substantial misrepresentation to include some of the pieces that Margaret talked about, specifically unlawful, unfair, or abusive practice. And I think just to talk a little bit about what Anne was saying in terms of aggressive recruiting practices, that's something that we hear from students all the time. And it's something that I think that, some schools have gotten very good at sort of towing the line and not quite misrepresenting, but at the same time being so aggressive in their recruiting practices that I think that would be something that should be considered in a defense to repayment claim. And it's not just what we're hearing from students themselves, it's some of the documents that were recovered as part of the Harkin report from schools themselves about their recruiting tactics, this idea of a paying funnel, one of the documents said it's all about uncovering their pain and fears. Another, talked about the ideal people to target as a potential student, and it was, and I quote, victims of physical and mental abuse, people with low self-esteem, single parents, people that recently gave birth, welfare moms with kids. So, and, what we hear then on the back end is that, the daily phone calls with messages that are really manipulative and really sort of poking at the insecurities of people, like, don't you want your kids to be proud of you? Like, do you want to be a loser forever? Literally those types of high pressure tactics. And that's, again, something that we have heard from students, but it's not just something we've heard, it's something that was in subpoena documents from certain schools. So I do think adding a standard for abusive to account for practices like that and have that be part of a borrower's consideration for a defense to repayment claim is really important. Because I do think it's common, and I do think that there's a level at which that can reach the standard where it could be called abusive, and the borrower's loan should be discharged. And I think that the only other piece is just in terms of this, I really agree. I think it's Barney that said striking this language about when a borrower could discover or reasonably could have discovered. A lot of people don't necessarily understand right away, especially not within a 2-year statute of limitations, whether or not they were wronged. And that's something that can be a little bit unclear. We're talking about, many of us have law backgrounds, education backgrounds, we're all at this table, and some of these standards in the language are hard for us to understand. So for us to then ask students to sort of discover that evidence themselves and figure out what is gonna sort of constitute a good defense themselves and bring it within 2 years, I think is just a lot to ask, and I think taking that piece out along with the statute is really important for there to be parity in this process, so that, you don't have 2 years to defend them and your loans can be, collected in perpetuity. So those two points.
Thank you. Alyssa?
Also, with regard to the statute of limitations, we had a quick discussion, and we don't think that 2 years is long enough either. Students could go to another school, at which point in time they're not really focusing on their prior education. I think the point about being called to duty is a good point. But then on the other hand, we also think that having no statute of limitations is too broad of a spectrum to be put into regulation. One thing that maybe could be considered to assist students in understanding this process is to possibly incorporate some education about PTR and the entrance counseling piece that all students are required to do as an upfront way to at least let them know in very simple terms that if you aren't given what was promised you, what you expected, then you have this recourse. I think then when we try to make contact with them, as in the case of the Corinthian students who maybe aren't responding, it may jog some memory of that. That would be helpful on the front end as far as educating the students to maybe help when we're thinking about crafting a statute of limitations.
Chris DeLuca?
I had a question about substantial misrepresentation and interpreting that, and particularly in the context of Title IX and clearing. I know there was a couple questions that Dennis asked earlier about that, but in thinking in terms of particularly with all the press and with all the enforcement actions and the effort with the department and the Office for Civil Rights on Title IX, thinking about two circumstances in particular, and one being if there is an OCR finding that a school has a sexually hostile environment, is that something that would trigger a borrower defense? The idea being that the student was unaware that that situation occurred, it was existing at that school when they enrolled, and now they're enrolled at that school and find out that based on an OCR investigation and a finding by OCR that that school has a sexually hostile environment. And the other question is from a reporting standpoint, and not so much, Gail, you had mentioned, that it's failing to file a fire safety report isn't what we're talking about here at the borrower defense, but what about a finding that a school's actual statistics were incorrect, or that there was, even to the extent that the school manipulated their clery reporting statistics? Is that a misrepresentation that would lead to a borrower defense claim?
two more. Barney?
I very quickly just want to respond to David's comment to clarify any confusion about the application of state law. For consumer protection laws, it's the state where the misconduct occurred that controls. The law of the consumer's home state doesn't follow them around from state to state. So the situation described can happen. Again, same campus, same city, same school, different laws. What could happen is in very, very large schools with campuses in multiple states, it could. So you go to a school in New York, you're going to be subject to New York consumer protection laws versus school in New Jersey, you're going to be subject to New Jersey consumer protection laws. And this is just a business process that schools and other businesses go through all the time. If you don't like the laws of a particular jurisdiction, you don't have to do business there. But a school in California cannot escape California law. They're always going to be subject to the AG and various consumer protection laws in California full stop.
Chris?
Yeah, I just wanted to, in terms of questions for the department, I'd like to hear the rationale behind the 2 years. I mean, obviously we've heard from, this seat and other seats at the table that, we don't like it because the collection can continue in perpetuity. So I just would, out of curiosity, what was the rationale for the 2 years, just kind of a starting point for the draft. Also, Noah's question and Irene's question behind what exactly is the role of state law, how do you envision the interplay between the federal standard and state law, how can we, again, ensure, we would like to ensure that state law sort of maintains its current stature, but it would just be useful, again, to hear the rationale that was used going into this draft. And then finally, I'd like to hear more about the department's consideration around the question of heightened deference to evidence being provided by state regulators and AGs, and whether or not that's a topic that you would consider putting into the rule, and why or why not.
I wanted to speak briefly about the statute of limitations issue, just because to represent the community that I'm here to represent, which is the legal aid community. There are so many reasons in our experience why borrowers will not be able to meet any statute of limitations necessarily, and that the only purpose that this inclusion is going to accomplish is going to be cut off meritorious claims. Borrowers don't, for example, the department circulated issue paper 11 today in advance of the session. You're recognizing that borrowers aren't aware of their rights when it comes to closed school discharge. What could be more obvious of a fact to a borrower that the school they're attending has closed? If they know that has happened, yet there's under application for closed school discharges. So Dennis suggested earlier that when there's a breach of contract, it's obvious right away. It's simply not the case. It's not the case. I can get into why 2 years is wrong, 4 years is wrong, 6 years is wrong, 8 years is wrong. And I understand, as you pointed out earlier, Susan, there is a difference between being heard and being persuaded, but I would like you to be open to being persuaded that the statute of limitations here is unfair and incredibly problematic in this regulation.
So 2 things. One, a breach of contract example I'd like to consider as well. School offers in its catalog, we're offering this program this year. And it turns out over a class this semester, and it turns out only one person enrolls, so they close that class for that semester. Is that rise to a breach of contract at the time? But that's something I'd like clarification on. On substantial misrepresentation, I have my own concerns about this, and I think, as I talked about last time, when the department is dealing with its regulations, it's guided by convention concerns, a number of other things that moderate the effect in dealing with the schools in order to fine or things like that. When you have a situation where the student is pursuing their rights, there is no such way to moderate, so you have to have a limitation for whoever the trier fact is to consider. And by not having an intent standard, something in here that says this school meant to do, or was so reckless with regard to the truth of the matter, that that it's right and just that they should be culpable and that this won't be district. I'll give you an example. Again, the University of Fred, in the state of Fred, so this is a public university. On its website, it says we have a 99% job placement rate. We should all be spent that. During an investigation, the dean of job placement says, "Oh no, that's completely untrue." Right? So there's no question here, right? No question at all. There has been a misrepresentation. It is clear as can be. However, we unravel the ribbon here. What we find is, well, this was some language we just had as a placeholder that the web designer put on this site, right? And we just didn't catch it. We didn't catch it. Is there negligence? Maybe. But, is this a misrepresentation that the student, that we should be getting back the student's loans? Or was there an intentional bad act there? I don't know. I mean, I would like to consider that, and I think there needs to be some form of intent standard. I think I'd be open to discussing what that looks like. But the school's got it. We want to punish bad actors. Again, I said last time, they're good actors. No one needs bad actors. But it's got to be good where the conduct is culpable. And I think that's a real problem.
No.
I think it's a valid point. I think that's why we had raised earlier, I think Barney at the very beginning, and I believe Gail provided some assurances in this regard, but that we uncouple the thought of school culpability and borrower relief. There may be a situation where a borrower did not get the benefit of the education they were promised. The borrower harmed, absolutely. So the borrower have gone to school if they had known the true facts about what their school used to be like. Absolutely. Not. But there may be a situation where the department, either because of school culpability or other considerations, doesn't then choose to go after the school to assert liability. But the borrowers, we need to make clear that the borrower's relief isn't dependent on that decision. That those two decisions are separate because there are different considerations that go into each one. And I think what we've been tasked with is figuring out a way to get relief to borrowers. That's what that's a specific problem that at least I thought we were brought here to address. I understand there's definitely a role in making sure that borrowers are abused and that schools that are bad actors are shut down, but we need to consider those two concepts separately. And separately to the point of statute of limitations, there is a very good reason that there are statute of limitations that they're valid. I mean, the issue of certainty, but again, there's good reasons why those statute of limitations are waived as long as the debt can still be, in terms of defending against the debt, as long as that debt is still collectible.